President Biden will travel to Pennsylvania today for a campaign rally in his hometown of Scranton. The president's campaign says he'll give a speech on economic policy with a major focus on taxes. The president will highlight that Donald Trump's plan would result in up to $3.5 million in cuts for some of the wealthiest Americans, which is 70 times what a typical family in Scranton makes in an entire year. Today's visit is the start of a 3-day swing in the vital battleground state for President Biden. Joining us now, White House reporter for Bloomberg, Akayla Gardner. Akayla, good morning. Good to see you again. So the economy has been a tough sell for President Biden throughout this campaign. As you well know, his campaign advisors point to metrics and say, look, things are actually going pretty well. Remember where we started with the pandemic. But last week's inflation news certainly dealt that narrative a blow. Tell us, how does the campaign intend to turn the message around?
Yeah, the president is going to be in Pennsylvania for 3 days. This is something that we have not really seen him do yet with a single state. If he spends this much time on the road, he's usually hitting multiple states, but he's in his home state of Scranton, or he'll be going to Scranton, his home state of Pennsylvania, before he heads to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. These are two of the biggest cities in the state. All of them are blue, but as you mentioned, the issue of the economy still weighs heavy on voters' hearts. The campaign and the White House have really tried to remind voters what the country was like in 2020, the raging pandemic, job losses, and yet they feel as though they have had a strong recovery. But that is something that is still hard for voters to swallow, who are seeing higher prices at the grocery store, on rent, and they're really going to have to push that conversation forward. And I think that is exactly what the president is trying to do today. He's talking about his tax policies. He wants to restore the child tax credit, and he's promising not to raise taxes for Americans who make more than $400,000 a year. So he's really going to have to drive home this issue, particularly on the economy, especially in the blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
And hard to see President being reelected if he can't win all 3 of those states. And such important emphasis being placed on turning out those Philadelphia suburbs, but also black voters in places like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia itself. We'll be watching his campaign swing this week. Let's hit a few other topics now, Akayla. So late yesterday, Speaker Johnson unveiled new plans for Ford aid, suggesting separating them into separate bills. Give us a sense as to what is the White House's early reaction. Is this something they're going to support?
This is something the White House is strongly against. They do not want to see a standalone bill on either Israel or Ukraine. There is a reason that these two issues were tied together in that Senate bipartisan bill, because they really feel like they can leverage both of those. They have the support of the Senate. They have House members who really support aid to Israel. So this is something that they want to see continue to tie together, along with funding for the Indo-Pacific and Taiwan. But of course, Speaker Mike Johnson says this could come to a vote on Friday, and he expects all 3 of those issues to be separate, and he might have some leverage here after he just appeared with Donald Trump and Mar-a-Lago on Friday, who of course has been against Ukraine aid. But if he's able to convince some of these ultra-conservative Republicans that Trump may be comfortable with this, or giving his vote of confidence for him to go forward, he might be able to pull this off.
Yeah, Israel seems certain to pass. Ukraine's the issue. Also, even if he can get it through the House, the Senate probably not going to love this either. They already have a bill that they signed off on. We'll be watching that this week as well. So, Akayla, an interesting dynamic here. Former President Trump, he was in the New York courthouse yesterday. He's going back today. He's going to be there a lot in recent weeks. The president himself has made clear he doesn't want to talk about Trump's legal issues. He wants to keep a line between the White House and any matter with the Department of Justice or any local jurisdiction. But how does the campaign, the Biden campaign and its surrogates, Democrats, how do they intend to capitalize on this and drawing this contrast?
Yeah, it's been interesting to see this, because the Biden campaign has really followed the lead of the president here and the White House. They do not want to specifically talk about any of Trump's legal woes. And I think that's partly because Trump has tried to paint this as a politically motivated attack against them. And that's not something that they want to feed into. But yet they're very much enjoying this contrast of President Biden continuing to be on the trail, continuing to have that flexibility. And they also believe they have been very strong when it comes to fundraising, as well as campaign advertising on television, and really building out some of these field offices. They are planning to open over 100 field offices across the country. So this is something that they feel they are way ahead in terms of Donald Trump. And they're really being able to beat some of these early concerns that we heard from Democrats and within the party, that they had this slow start to the campaign, and yet Trump has really not been able to catch up when it comes to that ground game. And this is something that they feel they are very strong with going forward.
And it does feel like a bit of a pivotal moment here as we're finally seeing Trump tied to a courtroom day after day. And what's the president doing? Engaging on a 3-day barnstorming swing through a vital battleground state, this time Pennsylvania. That in itself might be the contrast they want. We really appreciate all the ground covered for us this morning by White House reporter for Bloomberg News, Akayla Gardner. Akayla, thank you again.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.